Okay, but first I have a complaint about Marty.
Oh, good.
Somewhere in my mind, I remember you saying something about Jimi Hendrix,
Uh-huh.
which was, and correct me if I'm wrong, something along the lines of, why would you listen to him when he always plays out of tune?
When you can do what?
When he always plays out of tune.
It sounds like something I would say.
Okay, you're not
Yeah.
a Hendrix fan.
I'm not the biggest fan of Jimi Hendrix, which people think is strange for a guitarist, but every single person has their own taste, and each person's taste is equally valid. And so my most admired people think Hendrix is absolutely God. So, and everyone is completely different, and I think it's the differences in tastes and opinions that make music fun, and that's what makes high school buddies' arguments fun and things like that. And I think a lot of people, kind of come at me because I've never just been the biggest Hendrix fan in the world. Of course, I respect him and all of his great achievements. It's just not what I listen to. I would prefer listening to AKB48 than Jimi Hendrix or Momoito Clover. And I think a lot of my guitar playing peers would probably not agree with that, but it makes for some fun discussions. And I played Budokan with AKB48, and that might be in my top 3 highlights of my life in Japan. Because I guested with everybody, but AKB48 has my favorite J-pop song, which is called Heavy Rotation.
Okay.
And sometimes when you get these offers to collaborate, they just say, okay, we want you to play on this one song, and that's what it is. I just knew that when they asked me to collaborate someday, they were going to ask me to play that song. And when they did, it's just like, this is why I came to Japan, for moments like this. And it's just one of my absolute favorite things that I've ever done. And I guess you just have to be a fan to understand just how much fun that would be. And I think most of all of us here in this room are fanatics about something. So, like, regardless how ridiculous other people think that something is, when you get to actually connect with that thing, it's really it's a magic moment. So I would say AKB48 at Budokan was up there for sure.
It seems like J-pop has not yet reached the level of K-pop. So my question to you is, 1, how can they, or B, should they even try to reach the level of K-pop?
Wonderful question, and I've got an easy answer for why it isn't. Like I said before, Japan's music is very, very much melody-based. K-pop is very, very much dance-based and based on dance formations that are in the music videos. So when you watch a K-pop video, the most fun thing to do with it is to copy the dance formations. That can be done all around the world. And in the Japanese music scene, just being danceable is not going to sell records. You got to have a melody. The melody is king in Japan. And then you've got the lyrics, and then you've got the vocalist's magic. And it doesn't mean the vocalist is a great singer. You don't have to be who's a great Adele or something like that. You've just got to have a magical something in the voice. And the Japanese are very, very, very good at discovering that magical little twinge in people's voices. Like hetauma is a concept that Japanese people enjoy, but unfortunately people in America don't have the nuance in their listening abilities to understand how good it is to listen to something that's not perfect, but it's kind of close to being okay, but has its own magic. Japanese are wonderful at that. But K-pop doesn't even bother with that. It's just about dance moves and like kind of a danceable beat. And therefore, you can be in Thailand, you can be in Vietnam, you can be in Russia, you can be in Europe and understand and enjoy K-pop. But Japan, the popular music, it's not really, there's a niche for it. And groups like Baby Metal, I wouldn't really necessarily call that J-pop. But I think there's a niche for unique things from Japan making it outside of Japan. But K-pop is just, it's too perfect for everywhere else. And I don't think it's ever going to compete with K-pop, nor should it really try to.
All right, then you answered the second question.
Yeah.
You're saying it should not. They shouldn't worry about it.
Did I answer it?
Yeah, because again, I come from the business side, right? So the people I deal with are like, how can we, sell more?
I don't think it's necessary. I think there's a lot of artists, maybe not so much now, but I think some artists in Japan, they aim for popularity outside of Japan. And I think that can only happen by luck and organically. And I've said this a million times, Japan, and like you said, it's like a planet, and it's completely self-sufficient. It really doesn't depend on trends from outside of Japan as much as trends from outside of Japan influence other countries. It really doesn't. It's very self-contained. So I don't think there's the motivation in Japan to really, let's break it in America as much as maybe some other countries might have. Does that sort of answer
Can I
your
challenge?
question?
I'm just
Please
saying,
do, please do.
Again, I come from the business side, right? So
Right.
the suits, right? The
Right.
suits are like, how the F can we sell more, right?
I say this is just from my own personal opinion. I think don't try to do things in English. Do it in your own way and let that Japanese charm be the selling point. Look at Baby Metal. They don't sing in English. It's very Japanese. What's more Japanese than three girls singing in front of some music that you wouldn't expect three girls to sing in front of? That's Japanese. If you try to Americanize it, I don't think Americans think that's so cool. And if you want to go back into history, there was a group called Shonen Knife that Nirvana saw. They took one look at this group and they became big fans of the group, and they took them on tour when Nirvana was at their peak. And they were just doing their thing. You know, maybe some katakana English, but it was very Japanese, very innocent, and only in Japan do secretaries play guitar punk rock. It could happen in Japan. It's not going to happen in America. So I think if you keep that Japanese stuff intact, you're going to get some fringe fans like myself, Nirvana, and Lady Gaga, who've liked Baby Metal and things like that. I think, for me, that's my answer. But business people might have other analytical answers for that.
Well, that's fine. Thank you.
Good question, though.
Let me follow up on that a little bit. First, I dispute. I think Baby Metal are 100% J-pop. The other difference I was told about many years ago, why Japanese pop music is different, apart from having 48 singers, of course, is karaoke.
Yeah.
Most Japanese pop was aimed at the karaoke market, not the buying market so much.
Super point. Karaoke, is so big in Japan that, like, when people are creating songs, they're absolutely creating things with the intention that people are going to want to sing this in karaoke and make it able to be sung in karaoke. Now, in America, a lot of, especially the female vocalists, it's based on showing how great this girl singer is and how great she can improvise and all that, which is fine, but no one can sing like that. So in Japan, it's kind of more of a reachable tegoro. I can't think in English. Tegoro, it's like reachable in Japan. So like, oh, I can kind of sing like that. So yeah, let's go to karaoke. I can do a pretty good job of that. That concept is so big in the creation of Japanese music. And on all of the places I've worked in Japan, there's been a little keyboard, a little small Casio keyboard in the studio. And what they use this for is to pluck out the utamelo, the singing melody. And if you can do it on one finger, then chances are most people are going to be able to sing it in karaoke. And you look at Oricon, look at the songs. You can probably sing that melody on one finger. It's a great cultural point. Karaoke not only means sales, but karaoke, inze, what's inze in English? Inze, royalties. Royalties from karaoke, so that's a very, very good point. It's also self-sufficient. Karaoke is in Japan. And that's a big reason why J-pop sounds like the way it does. Very good point.
And as everyone knows, you don't have to be a good singer to sing karaoke.
Right.
And the other question I wanted to ask is that you also talk about when you were young, you said that hard rock and heavy metal fans were mostly outcasts. And could you perhaps talk your own impression about Japanese hard rock and heavy metal fans from that aspect?
Super question. I love to explain this. Especially when I grew up, it's kind of I guess it's the same as it is now, but people who listen to like hard rock and loud music and all that stuff, it wasn't like the quarterback of the football team. It wasn't like the popular guys, not the smart guys, not the guys with great girlfriends. It wasn't the guys, top of the class honor roll guys. It was the guys who would like cut class and hang out with their friends and smoke cigarettes and maybe other things. And just the guys, not the popular guys, it was the outcasts. And that's just kind of where hard rock had its place in society. Popular people liked dance music and pop music, and they didn't really care so much about music. It wasn't important because they had good lives already. They didn't need to be medicated by getting deep into this music and being saved by the music. They were like, you know, oh, there's music in the background, great, let's dance, party, cool. But like for those of us who didn't have a whole lot of friends, we were like at home playing Black Sabbath at full volume and going, yeah. It's all right. This is so cool. So, but popular people weren't like that. In Japan, however, it is so completely different. You look at people in bands, you look at people who've dedicated their life to playing rock, and they were popular in school. They're good looking. They had girlfriends. They were on the sports team. They had good grades. Totally normal guys. But for some reason, they play rock music. And they're like in these bands playing these loud, obnoxious music. You meet the guys, and they're so completely polite and well-spoken and not like Kurt Cobain might possibly have been, but just normal good guys who had good jobs and just grew up nicely and have manners, and they're playing rock. And so you live here long enough, you try to analyze why this is to answer a question like that, and you can only give my own opinion. And I will stand on my opinion that hard rock and guitar-based or guitar-oriented music, heavy metal and guitar stuff, the reason why Japanese people of all kinds, of all types of people, the reason why they relate to it is because, and I welcome any opposing views, I think that in Japanese traditional music, the sound of an aggressively played stringed instrument plucked loudly, the shamisen with the big pick, the bachi, distorted guitars played aggressively is something that people's grandparents and great-grandparents are already used to and wired to listen to. They're used to it already. So if you listen to like old people's music, like enka or traditional music, lo and behold, there's distorted guitar solos in this music. It's like just right out of Iron Maiden or something. And it's like, who's listening to it? Somebody who's like 95 years old. And I'm like, that doesn't happen in America. So why is it? The distorted sound of a shamisen, there's like a switch on the top of the guitar pegs that if you switch it, it makes it sound ding, 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 really rattly and distorted. So Japanese people, they're already used to this. So to them, it's not a rebellious sound at all. In America, if you had a distorted guitar, it's like, oh my God, oh my God. That's why like Jimi Hendrix had such a big impact, because at the time, no one made noise with a guitar. It was like the most hated thing in the world. Certainly your grandmother wasn't listening to it. Rock and heavy metal was a way to piss off people. In Japan, I don't think it pissed really anybody off. So it's a kind of a different approach to the same thing. And I just think it's fascinating. And that's my answer to it. Now, there probably is another better explanation. But just with my musical experience here in Japan, that's what I think it is. That's what I think the difference is.
Following up on that, in a way, you earlier mentioned about audiences in Japan. And I remember when Alice Cooper came over here, he asked me what are audiences like in Japan. And I said, well, sometimes you have to give them permission to enjoy themselves because they have that kind of holding back. But I've seen gigs in like Motley Crue, people like that, Jeff Leppard, whatever, and they just go wild. And how was it for you with Megadeth when you came here?
Oh, it was at that time it was starting to get normal, like rock, heavy metal stuff. At that time, Korea was like the weirdest thing, because Korea, they couldn't do anything. There was like guys standing with guns in the audience while the audience was sitting like this. Maybe at the end of the song there was this kind of thing. But with Megadeth and all of my solo stuff after that, it was just kind of like more normal, like rock concerts and stuff like that. But another thing, I think what maybe Alice Cooper was talking about is Japan, they're very, very quiet when they're listening, and maybe between the songs they clap. And one explanation that I got, and which makes sense, is, which I completely agree with, is like people in Japan, they pay a lot for the tickets. They want to hear the goddamn song. You know what I mean? They're listening closely. And as a musician, it's kind of nerve-wracking, because usually when you're playing in America or Europe or something, people are just going crazy. And it's like if you make a mistake or you don't play accurately, nobody notices. But in Japan, it's like they're listening. One time I was in Kyoto, and we played live one night, and the next day we did a live radio broadcast. I'm speaking like Japanese. Broadcast. And there was call-in questions, and somebody called in the Kyoto radio station, says, "We saw you guys play last night. Didn't one of you guys make a mistake in the third song, right around the second verse?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, you're right." And so like they're listening closely. At the time it was kind of nerve-wracking, but then you get used to it, and then you realize that it's truly out of love to that music and respect to the artists that they listen in that fashion. It's like at some point, like when you're overseas and you're playing live and people are just going completely wild and they're beating each other up, and it's fun to look at all that craziness, but sometimes it's like, hey man, I'm playing music here and I want you to listen to it. So I think I've kind of Nihonjinka ni nachattan desu. I've become Japanese, so when I go out and play elsewhere, I want people to listen what I'm doing, and I think they're just listening closely. Perhaps a little too closely.
On the other hand, of course, the people in America and Europe, they don't hear your mistakes.
Yeah, that's a good thing about it. That's a good thing about it.
And you can think, oh, I can make a mistake now.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to play out there, but, I think it's just cultural differences. One is not better than the other. It's just different, and I think the differences is what makes everything fun. And it's a change of pace to go from one to the other. So there's no one that's better or one that I like better, but it's a wonderful comparison. Wonderful.
Gary Bremerman, Power Up Solutions.
Hi.
Long-term resident of Japan. I've never invested the time and attention into J-pop or Japanese music. I'm a metalhead, new wave of British heavy metal, thrash, old hard rock. Are there any bands that you would recommend?
Sure.
That I should check out? Japanese bands? Just a few.
Certainly. The first one, immediately I would say Maximum the Hormone.
Oh, yeah.
You know them, right?
Know of them.
Oh, my God. Go directly there. And then go to Crossfaith. Go directly there. And then go to Man with a Mission. It's not as heavy as those, but what you'll find if you start going into that rabbit hole is you'll find that a lot of the Japanese harder music has the same sound that you like as heavy metal, but it's just in a different melodic context, and you're going to find that fresh. So if you start there, let me know what you come up with.
Thank you. And I did see Ningen Isu once.
Ningen Isu, yeah, there you go.
And that was fantastic.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but I just haven't gotten into it, so I'll go down the rabbit hole.
You start with Ningen Isu, and then you
right.
can't go wrong.
100% agree on Maximum the Hormone, but they're interesting also because they combine pop dynamics with really, really, really heavy dynamics.
Right.
Maybe you could address that somehow?
Yes, this is one of the reasons I love Japan. You could never have something as poppy as what they do in America. No one would have that in their body to do it, and it probably would be tricky to make people get into that. But in Japan, people are okay with that. And it started with X Japan. When I first heard X Japan, I'm like, how can they have this ballad right next to this full-on thrash metal song? But in Japan, it's totally normal. I'm like, I love the country that allows you to have so much ryokyoktan. Ryokyoktan te. What's ryokyoktan?
Crossover.
Not crossover, but extremes. Extreme contrasts in the same place.
Yeah.
Extreme contrasts. When I grew up, and even now in metal especially, it's like, it's got to be metal. It's got to be metal all the time. You can't have a ballad. You guys sold out. You can't have that. But in Japan, it's almost expected. It's all metal, but where's your ballad? Where's your pop song? You've got to have it all. So for me as an artist and a musician, I just find it so much more liberating being here, because I love pop music and I love being able to, there's no limit to what you can do. You know, in America, it's kind of, you're kind of in a box. You got to stay metal all the time. You know.
I guess in a way, Nirvana had a little bit of both.
Yeah, Nirvana's like a pop band that was loud, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
I've got here surprises. What surprised you most about Japan in terms of the life in Japan and the music in Japan?
The biggest surprise was before I moved here, is when I was touring here often, when I realized that probably international music only makes up about 20% of what everybody's listening to. People listen to Japanese domestic music about 80% of the time. There's probably a better stat on that, but a lot of the time. And that's why I came here. I thought I was weird because I was listening to J-pop. And then I get here and no, that's what everybody's listening to. When you were coming over here as an international artist, you were kind of a niche. You know, international music is a niche. You know, the people who are listening to Japanese, the big major Japanese artists, they might not even know who Adele is or Beyonce or Metallica or all that. They might have, oh, that's some foreign group, but they're really into the Japanese music, and I could see why, because it's just so deep. And it's the endless well of different, unique things with so much creativity that if you're a fan of it and a fan of melodies, you know, it's endless. And I'm still as big a fan as I was when I first moved here. So I think that was the biggest surprise. And everything else, you know, nothing too major other than that.
And you get frustrated, like many of us do, that people in America or Europe really don't understand Japan?
Good question. No, I don't get frustrated about that. I totally understand it, because even though I've lived here maybe 20-something years, and I'm completely surrounded by Japanese people 24/7. No one around me speaks any English for the whole 20 years. And I still feel like, yeah, I know a lot about Japan, but I don't completely understand it, and I don't expect to completely understand it, and I'm fine with that. And I think a lot of people need to understand that it is, in fact, a separate planet, and if you can find a way to coexist within it and bring something to it, I think it's a wonderful place. Let me finish with this, because this is a good thing we're on here. Japan has always been in need and desire of talented people from the entire world, because Japan has a great sense of wanting to learn from other cultures. First thing you come to Japan is people will ask you, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What do you think of this in Japan? Japanese people are very smart to analyze what people from other cultures think about Japan and use that information in very creative ways. So I find that a lot of the non-Japanese people, all of you included, have brought something special to Japan that is useful in Japan. And Japan kind of attracts very motivated people, because the language and the culture is so different and so difficult to really grasp for other cultures that you have to be very motivated to live here. So it kind of makes a small circle of people, but the people who wind up really into Japan are like super motivated. You get people who are into anime or games especially, they're like crazy motivated. And I meet these people all the time when I tour outside of Japan. People, I'm learning Japanese now, and they just want to speak Japanese to me, and they're just so incredibly, they're so into it that there's like a fanaticism about Japan that doesn't exist with other countries. Like the way I feel about J-pop is the way some people probably feel about anime or games or martial arts or Japanese cuisine or language or whatever. There's a fanaticism, and that breeds talented people, actually. Not putting myself in that group, but it breeds people who are motivated to really, really learn the language and the culture and live here. And what I'm trying to say is, Japan is a very older society. It's not like some countries where the average age is like 25 or something. It's a very, very old society with a lot of room for young and talented people to come in and bring great things from other cultures into Japan. And so if there's people out here on YouTube that are watching this, my message is, do not give up on the language, because that language is going to be the key to actually doing whatever your dream is here in Japan. You cannot do it without your language, or it will be very, very difficult to do without your language here in Japan, because I found that for me, writing emails, 1,000 emails a day, they're all in Japanese, and I couldn't imagine doing that not in Japanese. So those out there who are listening to this, if you're crazy about a Japanese thing, just go for the language, learn the language as best you can, and come out a bunch of times and see what the world here in Japan is like, because I think Japan is very, very welcoming to people who are interested in Japan. It's because they can't really figure out why we're interested in Japan. It seems like, why are you interested in Japan? They want to know that. They really want to know that. And then when you give them the answer, it just opens a whole dialogue of a lot of cool stuff. So I encourage everyone out there who has that insane dream of coming out here to do something to just get into it and do it. And you don't have to be perfect like a Robert Campbell type of person. My Japanese is not at his level, but it's facilitated me to be able to do anything I wanted to do here in Japan. So I recommend bringing your unique talents to Japan, become an asset to Japan, and best of luck. And thank everybody so much for coming here and being with me for this. I feel weird about talking this much, but thank you for your questions, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
But before we go, we can give you a 1-year honorary membership of this club. So please come by and buy me a drink.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. This is good fun.